Hey, it's Dustin, and I'm back with a review of Jay Peak, Vermont. Jay Peak is one of the most unique mountain destinations on the Northeast, and today I'm going to be talking about the mountain, the skiing, and whether it's worth the trip. And then I'll give it an official rating. Jay Peak is widely known for one thing: the snow. Jay Peak gets more natural snowfall than any other ski area in the east, and you can tell. Trails stay softer for longer, and the trees can be amazing. They get somewhere in the range of 347 from the stats on the website to 390 inches per year, which is on the trail map. These numbers rival resorts in the Rockies and places like Colorado. Some skiers complain that Jay Peak doesn't have a snow stake on camera like every other mountain does, and that they may be juking the stats. But even if this is true, Jay Peak is still in the upper echelon of snowfall in the east. Even when they're not receiving natural dumps, there is snowmaking on 80% of non-glade trails. This does a decent job of covering the main trails, although Jay Peak's snowmaking system is not top tier. As far as size, Jay Peak is best described as mid-sized. Their vertical drop is somewhere in the low 2100s. I've seen numbers such as 2122, 2112, and 2153 at different places across the internet. Even from Jay Peak themselves, there doesn't seem to be an exact number, so let's just go with 2100-ish. Base elevation is somewhere around 1750, and the summit is somewhere around 3862. This number puts them at 9th in vert in New England, and even lower when you consider all of the east. Jay Peak has 385 skiable acres, which puts it at number 15 in New England for skiable acreage. This is all spread out over 81 trails. Before I get into my favorite section, which is lifts, we need to talk a little bit about Jay Peak's recent history to understand how they got to where they are now. In 2008, Miami investor Ariel Quiros purchased Jay Peak for a total of $24 million. His strategy was to use investments through the EB-5 program. This program allowed foreign investors who invested at least $500,000 into depressed areas to become U.S. citizens. Quiros used a lot of this money to build a new hotel water park combination as well as a new country club at Jay Peak. In the mid-2010s, there were several major lift projects planned, but in 2016, a $350 million scandal was uncovered, and it was confirmed that Quiros defrauded his investors. The SEC seized $81 million worth of assets from Quiros, including Jay Peak and nearby Burke. In 2020, Quiros pled guilty to several federal charges, including wire fraud, money laundering, and obstructing investigations. Unfortunately for skiers, no major lift projects were completed under Quiros. Jay Peak spent the next 7 years in government receivership, which meant that they could continue operating, but there were certainly no capital investments taking place. They did a decent job of this, but Jay Peak saw no major improvements over this period. Eventually, after an auction, Jay Peak was purchased in 2022 by Pacific Group Resorts, or PGRI. They purchased the mountain for $76 million. PGRI is a small resort chain, and they operate a handful of mountains: Wisp, Maryland; Wintergreen, Virginia; Mount Washington, BC; Silver Star, BC; Powderhorn, Colorado; and now Jay, Vermont. The new owners have been solid so far, but their pockets are not as deep as Altera, Boyne, and Powder, so we haven't seen the major improvements that many were hoping for. Not yet, anyway. Because of all of these events, Jay Peak hasn't seen a new lift since 2012, and all of the main lifts are much older than that. First off is the Jet Triple. This lift was built in 1985 and it services 1160 vert. It kind of has its own terrain pod over on Looker's Left, and it services mostly black diamond terrain, although the terrain over here isn't truly on an expert level. There are also a few blues, and this is an excellent lift to lap from the stateside base area if you're an expert or intermediate skier. I love the Timbuktu Glade, and it's actually a lot bigger than it looks on the map. Jet is one of the few lifts at Jay that's actually protected from wind. It's usually running even when the other lifts are on hold, and it's pretty comfortable. Next is the Bonaventure Quad. This chair starts at the stateside base area and goes about 3/4 of the way up the mountain. It was built in 1987 and it services 1370 feet of vert. Even though it has a good mix of black and blue terrain, I think Bonnie is better suited for expert skiers compared to Jet. Next is the Taxi Quad, which is the newest lift at Jay Peak. It's from 2012. This lift runs parallel to Bonaventure for about the first third of it, and it services mostly green terrain and also just about all the terrain parks at Jay. This is the lift you'll want to session if you're a beginner or a park rat. There's also a moving carpet at Stateside for first timers and young kids. The next lift is the Village Double. It's an old double that was relocated from Camelback, PA in 1995. So I'm not sure the original date of construction, but it's pretty old. There are only actually 2 trails that you can lap on this lift, and they're both beginner trails. This is probably a good zone to lap if you're a beginner that graduated from the Magic Carpet, because it's the one zone that doesn't interfere with like expert skiers skiing down to the main base areas. It's also going to be a lot of people staying in the condos. They can ski down to this lift, and then from the top they can get to Stateside or the tram side. Next, we have another moving carpet. It's at the tram side, and it's also probably going to be used by first-time skiers and young kids. The next lift at J Peak is the Aerial Tram. This is their most iconic lift. The tram boasts a vertical drop of 1952 and a line speed of almost 2,000 feet per minute. This lift is originally from 1966, but it received new cabins in the year 2000. As part of this retrofit, the capacity of the cars was decreased from 60 to 45. This, along with the inherent nature of the lift, makes for some truly abysmal capacity. The listed capacity is only 370 people per hour. A typical high-speed quad has a capacity of 2,500 people per hour, so this means that a typical detachable lift can move as many people in 1 hour as the tram can move in an entire day. This makes the tram one of the lowest capacity lifts operating in North America today. That being said, the Aerial Tram provides some of the most iconic lines at J Peak and in all of the Northeast. Face chutes, Tuckerman chutes, Green Beret, and Valhalla stay fresh for days because of the low capacity up here, and they're some of the best runs at the mountain. That being said, the tram is probably not worth it if you're an intermediate skier and the lines are long. The trails up here are not that great for intermediates, and the 2 blues are kind of just traverses to get to other trails that are serviced by other lifts. It's not uncommon for the tram to see lines of over an hour on weekends and holidays, given the low capacity, and it's probably worth 1 lap if you're an expert skier, but other than that, I think it's best to avoid on these days. The next lift on the tram side is the Metro Quad. This lift was relocated from Sugarbush in 2002. It goes from the tram side base to about a third of the way up the mountain. The terrain here is mostly green, but there are a few blues, and you can use this lift to get over to Stateside if the tram and the flyer are on Lindhold or if they have really big lines. Next up is the Flyer Express Quad. This is the only detachable lift at J Peak, and it's the only high-speed lift outside of the tram. It's a 1999 lift that services 1620 feet of vert. It runs from the tram side base to about 3/4 of the way up the mountain. There's a really good terrain pod over here for intermediates and experts, but a lot of the runs end up in a long traverse to take you back to the tram side base. This lift can be extremely windy, and especially on the top third, it's a bit of an uncomfortable and really cold ride. This lift often sees wind holds even when other lifts at other resorts and even at J Peak are running. That is it for the lifts at J Peak. There are not all that many. Beginner terrain at J Peak is not really a strong suit. None of the main upper mountain lifts service any green trails at all, and all of the greens are concentrated at the very bottom of the mountain. Only 20% of J Peak's trails are greens, and if you're a beginner, you'll be stuck on Taxi, Village Double, and Metro. Most of the greens at J Peak are in really popular areas where experts and intermediates will be cruising down at high speeds. If you really want to be isolated, there's only 1 spot to go, and that's a Village Double, and there's only 2 trails there, and they're pretty short. The Village Double is also not very consistently open. J Peak is decent, but not the best for intermediate terrain. It's a good place to go if you're trying to learn how to ski glades and you're already an intermediate skier. There are easy and fun blue glades at the bottom of almost all terrain pods. 40% of the trails are rated as blue square intermediate terrain. Intermediate skiing at J is not as great if you like skiing groomers. The biggest problem comes in at the bottom of Vermonter, Montrealer, and Northway. This section of the mountain becomes extremely crowded with intermediate skiers as intermediate terrain from all major lifts funnels down right into this area. The only way to avoid this area if you're an intermediate is to take the flyer and use some of the trails on Looker's right. However, these trails are not quite as interesting, and most of them end up in the long catwalk to get back to the tramside base. Expert terrain at J Peak is outstanding. Although they don't have any trails with a double black diamond rating, some of the more difficult black diamonds are up there with the most difficult trails that you'll find in the East. Every upper mountain area boasts fantastic steeps, and there are usually plenty of powder stashes if you know where to look. There are several black diamond runs at J Peak that fall into the iconic category, and these include Face Chutes, Tuckerman's, Green Beret, Valhalla, Timbuktu, Vertigo, and Staircase. Navigation and crowds at J-Peak are okay, not terrible, but not the best. There are 2 base areas and navigating between them can be challenging, but it's not impossible. Lines for the tram can also get extremely long. But the real problem comes in when some of the lifts are on wind hold, which is a pretty common occurrence. If the flyer and the tram go down, lines everywhere else can get kind of insane. This is especially true because all lifts outside the tram and the flyer are slow, old, and have fixed grips. Next up is lodges and lodging. There are 4 official lodges at J-Peak. The first is the Stateside Lodge and Hotel. There's a restaurant, a bar, a cafeteria, a ski and ride school, a gear shop, and a rental shop. This is probably the best spot for day trippers that are going to ski out of the stateside. Next is the Tramside Base Lodge. This is right next to the Tram Haus Lodge, and I can't really tell what the difference is. I think there's across a small pathway from one another. Between the 2 of them, you get access to the tram, childcare, guest services, a cafeteria, a couple of restaurants, a couple of bars, a spa, a tuning shop, and a Nordic ski and snowshoe center. The only other lodge is at the top of the tram, and it's called the Sky House. It's basically a warming hut with a basic cafeteria. There are 2 hotels on J-Peak. First is Stateside. It's a great place to stay. There are a couple of restaurants and a couple gear shops. Next is Hotel J, which has a conference center and an indoor water park. There are also a few restaurants and activities for after skiing. There are also options for on-mountain condos, and these are all between the 2 base areas. Many of them offer ski-on, ski-off access, and they can be good options if you have a larger group. Lodging options outside the main resort are extremely limited. It can be pretty challenging if you're on a budget. Definitely prepare to drive 30 minutes or more every morning if you decide to stay off mountain. There is not much nearby. Value at J-Peak is pretty good for what you get, and as far as I can tell, the maximum price for a walk-up window ticket is $139. You can get better deals online, and these prices are even lower on weekdays. J-Peak is also a member of the Indy Pass, and you can get 2 days there with the Indy Pass products. J-Peak is definitely remote. It gets a lot of Canadian visitors, and it's only 2 hours from Montreal. However, it's almost 4 hours from Boston, 6:15 from New York, and 7:45 from Philadelphia. This makes it attractive for Canadian visitors, but it's very far for most people in the United States. Before I get into possible future expansions, I'll give J-Peak an official rating. J-Peak's strong suit is snow, and it gets 5 out of 5 stars. The size is medium, and it gets 3 stars. Lifts are generally old and slow, and it gets a 2 for lifts. Beginner terrain at J is not very good, and it gets 1 star. Intermediate terrain is about average for the area, and it gets 3 stars. Expert terrain is outstanding, and it gets 5 out of 5 stars. As far as navigation and crowds, J-Peak gets 3 out of 5 stars. It's pretty easy to get around, but lines can get long. For lodges and lodging, J gets 3 out of 5 stars. Value is pretty good, and J-Peak gets 4 stars. J-Peak is a remote mountain in rural Vermont, and it gets a 2 for location. All these ratings combined give J-Peak 3.1 out of 5 stars. The most likely expansion for J-Peak is actually just a replacement of the Bonaventure lift. The current lift is from 1987, and it suffers from occasional reliability issues. In 2013, as the EB5 scandal began to unwind, a new six-pack was proposed for this location. As I mentioned before, this never came to be, but in April 2024, NewEnglandSkiIndustry.com reported that J-Peak was targeting a new replacement for Bonaventure in 2025. This project was again sidelined in 2025, and the general manager Steve Wright cited cost increases related to tariffs and lower revenue. I'm still hoping that this lift replacement will take place in the next few years, but I think we need to adjust our expectations from the proposed six-pack probably to a high-speed quad. The next proposed expansion is West Bowl. These plans have been around for decades, and it's a massive expansion that includes 4 lifts, over 12 trails, and around 200 acres of new skiable terrain. This new zone would service a variety of terrain types from beginner to expert, and would almost double the size of J-Peak. I don't see this expansion occurring anytime soon due to its massive nature, but I wouldn't be surprised if it occurred sometime in the next few decades. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I hope you make it out to Jay Peak soon.